So today we'll be studying about general anesthetics. I'm starting the fifth unit in pharmacology. This is kind of a general unit for which you do not have any pathological correlation like neurological disorders related to psychosis or CNS is not present as such. You have a few CNS disorders, but not that will be included in this chapter. So this is something like a buffer that will come in between. I'll try to complete as much as cardiology as possible in pathology so that we can cover up cardiopharmacology later on. It'll be easier for you to understand once you are done with cardiopathology. So for the time period in between in pharmacology, we'll cover this. CNS stimulants and depressants. It's a big chapter. It has several, almost 9, 10 subunits in them. Drug classes, CNS and ANS. All right. Now coming to the first one, that is general anesthetics. All right. Uh, when we talk about anesthetics, this is basically an agent that will cause reversible loss of sensation. And whenever uh, we are trying to induce anesthesia, the goal is to give a reversible sense of loss of sensation. Basically, you're trying to do that in a patient. Now, when we talk about anesthesia, you have to understand that there will be different stages of general anesthesia. Now, obviously, when I refer to general anesthesia, it is affecting the patient as a whole, right? The completely sensation is lost, or that is what you're trying to achieve by giving a general anesthetic drug. Coming to the stages of general anesthesia, there are four main stages. All right. The first stage will be stage of analgesia. All right. If you can see varying responses here, the most important response will be, or at least for an anesthesiologist, how they can check which stage the patient is in or how the anesthesia is progressing is through pupils. So you have to keep an eye on this pupils. Okay, the third, yeah, the third column from the right, left, fourth column from the left. Pupils, no pre-med. So there is something called pre-medication as well. I'll explain that shortly after this chapter. There's something called pre-anesthetic drugs that are given. Okay, pre-anesthetics are basically those drugs that will be given to make sure anesthesia is um, a very pleasant experience for the patient. All right, we'll get into what is pre-anesthetics, but first we'll do what is general anesthetics. Now with general anesthetics, what you're trying to do is you're basically causing loss of sensation. You want proper analgesia for a long period of time and loss of consciousness along with a little bit of amnesia, and all the while suppressing your uh, body's reactions, reflexive reactions that will occur if you do not give an anesthesia. In case of injury, reflexively your body will do a few things. So you do not want that to happen during a surgery. So all of these will be part of general anesthesia. You'll understand in a bit what is happening. Now, when we talk about stages of anesthesia, the first one, as I was telling you, is called stage of analgesia. This is basically, here we are referencing an inhalational anesthetic wherein you're making the patient inhale the anesthetic. Okay, the anesthetic is in the inhalational form. So it's a gas basically. All right, or it will be a gas with very small volatile liquid particles that can be inhaled. Right, either way. Now, in stage of analgesia, this basically includes from the beginning of inhalation of that anesthetic to the point where the patient has lost their consciousness. Losing consciousness is a very important aspect of anesthesia. What you want to do, as I told you, with anesthesia, what you want to do is create loss of consciousness. You want to create senselessness. You want to decrease anxiety. You want to decrease gastric activity, complete GIT activity. You want to give proper analgesia, all of that, right? So that it will be easier to perform a surgery. Now, stage of analgesia will include a condition where reflexes of the patient along with respiration is normal. Now, whenever, let's suppose I take a small scalpel, okay, I hope you know what is a scalpel. I take a scalpel and okay, 1 second, people are joining, I didn't see that. Right. If I take a scalpel and I try to cut a patient, obviously their body will react reflexively, right? So I want to avoid that. Whenever I'm trying to perform surgery, I do not want reflexive activity to occur in a patient. If they are having reflexive activity, I will not be able to perform the surgery properly. Think about it this way: when a surgeon is trying to cut into your abdomen, or a surgeon is trying to cut into any particular part wherever the surgery is occurring, or whichever part is being operated on, you do not want the patient to be moving. right? You do not want to nick a nerve, or you do not want to cut in any place that you are not intending to cut, all right, simply because the reflexes were not dulled. So a stage of analgesia will be a condition where only loss of consciousness will occur. Pain is progressively abolished, pain slowly decreases, but respiration and reflexes are pretty much normal. As you keep continuing giving what you call more dose, rather than giving more dose, you're basically still inducing the drug. How you give analgesia, especially inhalational anesthesia, is you mix it with oxygen and nitrogen, and you make the patient inhale it in such a way that if have you guys ever been allowed to participate in a surgery, any surgery?
No, sir.
No. Okay, so what you do is with an inhalational anesthetic, you basically अब oxygen लगाते ना face पे, वैसा ही you put a mask containing the inhalational anesthetic and you count down. So basically from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, you keep counting down. So around 6 or 5, the patient will lose consciousness, and as they keep going deeper and deeper, they will go deeper into anesthesia. So as more time progresses, at one point of time, they will completely go deep into anesthesia, all right, as more time passes. Now coming to the second stage of anesthesia, that will be stage of delirium. Now this is a stage that is rarely seen nowadays with modern anesthetics. Initially with earlier anesthetics that were being used, a stage called stage of delirium would be seen. This is basically a stage in between loss of consciousness and a stage between loss of consciousness and surgical anesthesia. So in this condition, what patients used to exhibit were excitement. They would shout, they would cry sometimes, violent behavior, extreme reflexive activity. Right, that used to happen, but with modern anesthetics, it is rarely seen. Right, very rarely seen nowadays. It does not happen. Right. As you can see, pupils initially were constricted. They will dilate in stage 2. Then again, as you go into stage 3, it will constrict. And now coming to stage 3, that is stage of surgical anesthesia. This is the place where you perform surgery. Okay, you need your patient in stage 3 when you want to perform surgery. Stage 3 in turn will be divided into different phases. Phase 1 to phase 4. All right, you want your patient in stage 3 of anesthesia, specifically in phase 4 or plane 4 of general anesthesia, of what you call the third stage, surgical anesthesia. During this period of time, obviously the anesthesia goes into deeper planes, and respiratory depression is seen, where respiration goes down, your reflexes will go down, both pharyngeal, laryngeal reflexes go down. You can see here in the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth, sixth column from the left, pharynx and larynx reflexes, they will go down. The reflex from your glottis goes down, glottis and epiglottis रहता ना, that reflex will go down. It will not tighten up and it will not close your respiratory channel. That is the reflex that will happen if you are having injury, especially surgical kind of injury. Lacrimation will go down, muscle tone goes down. You do not want muscle tone during uh, especially very reactive muscle tone during surgery. You do not want that. If there is that, you will not be able to perform surgery. Every time you try to cut a patient, their muscles will twitch and you'll cut in places that you do not want to. You do not want to nick nerves. Okay, it can lead to paralysis or paresthesia of that organ. So the more less muscle tone you have, the lesser muscle tone you have, the better. At least to certain extent, you do not want complete loss of tonicity, but some tone will be there. All right. Uh, this basically will entail dilated pupils. Your muscle relaxation will occur gradually. Reflexes will be lost. All right. Uh, regular regular respiration will be very low. Okay, the respiratory rate will definitely go down. Okay, from here on out, if you are not stopping giving anesthesia at this point, see, your anesthesia will go in a way that is so basically you have understood this diagram, right? I'll switch to the board. Now when we talk about anesthesia, if I take it over a graph like this, okay, please एक second, एक काम कर सकता ना मैं, right, better. Now how your anesthesia works is, initially there will be a stage of induction, okay, where you're trying to induce anesthesia, you're trying to give anesthesia or produce the effect of anesthesia. At one point you will have achieved that point, and you will only go into maintenance, where you will try to maintain that anesthetic condition. And once the surgery is done, you remove the anesthesia and you go into stage of recovery. All right, this is how anesthesia works. All right, you will initially give an inducing agent. You basically induce anesthesia here. After that, you only maintain anesthesia, where, see, during this period of time, this is when the surgery is mainly occurring, and you are maintaining anesthesia. That's all. The patient is unconscious and they are anesthetized. After that, at this point, so from here and here, if I draw two lines, from here on out, what is happening is you basically stop giving the anesthetic, and depending on the anesthetic use, the patient will recover within maybe 1 day or maybe a couple of hours, depending on the anesthetic used. Right, this is how anesthesia generally works. I hope you are understanding what I'm talking till now. If you are having any doubts, please let me know. Now, if I am giving an inhalational, coming back to the stages of anesthesia, as I was going to tell you about stage 4, if I am stopping at this point, at point of induction here, all right, I'm not giving any further drug, and I am stopping at that point where anesthesia has been induced. Basically, I'm stopping at the stage of surgical anesthesia. That is well and good, I can perform surgery there. In case, because of overdosage or because of whatever reason, let's suppose anesthesia goes any deeper than surgical anesthesia, you will go into a stage called stage 4, which is medullary paralysis stage. Excuse me, medullary paralysis stage. This is basically a stage where your medulla, right, the part of your brainstem, their paralysis occurring, in the sense that this occurs only in overdose. What will happen is breathing will stop, completely stop. Circulatory system will fail. Your cardiovascular system will be severely affected. Death may occur. Pupils are completely dilated. Muscles will become flabby. Okay, I told you in surgical anesthesia you will have slight tone in muscle, but here they'll become completely flabby. Pulse will become very thready. Okay, and almost imperceptible. You will not be able to perceive pulse. If you're trying to check for pulse, you will not be able to sense pulse. That will happen, and BP will become very, very low. You do not want your patient in medullary paralysis. You want to stop at surgical paralysis. All right. So these are the 4 stages of anesthesia. I hope you understood the stages of anesthesia. All right. समझ में आया पूरों को? कोई doubt है? Please feel free to
Sir,
ask
can
doubts. Please, I didn't hear you.
you please repeat, sir?
The whole thing.
Sir, यही अभी anesthesia का medullary
Last.
region.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So basically, we are going from. I'll write it down 1 second. It'll be easier for you. So stages of anesthesia. We have stage 1, which is stage of analgesia. Here basically you are having what you call loss of consciousness with as you keep on progressing, the patient will have loss of consciousness as well. So pain will be lost, and what you call analgesia will occur. Progressively analgesia will occur. Stage 2 is 1 second, stage of delirium. Stage 3 is stage of surgical anesthesia. Stage 2 is not seen nowadays. Okay, with modern anesthetics, you rarely see that. Stage 3 is stage of surgical anesthesia, wherein you'll be performing surgery. That is the stage where you want to stop anesthesia. Now, from here on out, if you do not stop giving anesthesia and there is overdose, all right, you're basically making the patient go deeper into anesthesia. That is when the patient will enter stage 4, which is stage of medullary paralysis. This stage will entail cessation of breathing. Basically, the patient will stop breathing at this point. Okay, as I told you, if you check that graph, you only want to go up to the point where you're reaching surgical anesthesia. That is when you stop inducing the anesthesia, right? If you see that graph again, I'll just draw it for convenience. So it is increasing. At one point, you want to stop here. You want to stop inducing anymore. All right. If you go any higher from here like this, you're basically going into dangerous territory where you go into stage 4. You want to stop here, and from here on out, you want to only maintain anesthesia here, and let's suppose ऐसा लगाया मैं, and from here on out I have recovery. Okay, so if I am not stopping the induction here, I'm basically keep on increasing the dose and I'm keep on inducing the anesthesia, what will happen is medullary paralysis will occur, which will cause breathing to stop. Basically, if you remember, in your medulla you have your respiratory center. uh, your respiratory center is responsible for maintaining and controlling the respiratory rate and the respiration of your lungs. Basically, medullary paralysis, in medullary paralysis you will have cessation of breathing, your circulation will fail, circulatory failure will occur, death may follow, right? Obviously if your breathing and blood supply fails, then obviously you will die. Pupils will be completely dilated, muscles will become flabby, so you'll lose complete tonicity. All right, complete muscle tone is lost. And pulse, if you try to check the pulse in this stage, you'll not be able to feel the pulse, or it will be very very thready, so you're barely able to feel the pulse, and blood pressure will fall very very low. All right, so that is stage of medullary paralysis. You do not want to enter this stage, you want to remain in this stage to perform surgery. All right, these are the first stages of general anesthesia. I hope that clears your doubt. Chalo, ठीक है. Anyone
Thank you,
else?
sir.
Any doubts? That's okay. No one? Everyone understood what are the stages of analgesia? Sorry, anesthesia?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool.
Yes, sir.
Chalo. Now, coming to classification of general anesthetics, there are basically two main classes. All right. You have obviously inhalational anesthetics, and you have intravenous anesthetics. All right, these are the two main classes. So your intravenous will have these, both of them will have subclasses of their own. First, talking about inhalational anesthetics, you have gases or gaseous anesthetics, gaseous agents. This will include your nitrous oxide, your laughing gas, and cyclopropane and xenon. Okay, we'll discuss one drug from each class. So these are gaseous agents, and you have liquids. See, I told you inhalational, you can also give liquids. There'll be volatile particles that will be present in that gas. Okay, think of them like aerosols. Ether is the most common one, especially used in India also nowadays. Halothane is the most famous one that is used in India. Ether normally is not used nowadays in other countries. India mein abhi bhi use hota. Halothane though is the most popular one because it is relatively safe. You have enflurane, isoflurane, desflurane, and sevoflurane. You have others as well, itte basa examples. So these are the liquid types. All right. Then coming to intravenous anesthetics, you have something called inducing agents. These are particularly used to induce anesthesia. So you have one famous one called thiopentone. Thiopentine, sorry. Thiopentine sodium जैसा आता है, and you have propofol and phosphopropofol. All right, these are inducing agents. Then there's something called dissociative anesthetics. To understand dissociative anesthetics, you'll have to understand what is dissociative anesthesia. I'll explain that what is dissociative anesthesia when we come across this drug class. This will basically have one main drug, ketamine. Okay, and the third type will be opioid analgesics. We'll not get too deep into opioid analgesics because opioid analgesics is a drug class for you altogether. See, some drugs, for example, you will have a drug class called anti-inflammatory drugs. Okay, they will specifically be used for inflammation, but you will see that drug class as a subclass in some other main class. I'll repeat once again. Sometimes you will have a main class of drugs. Okay, for example, I have uh, antihypertensives. Okay, antihypertensives are a class of their own. They are basically drugs that are given for hypertension, for increased BP. But if I'm talking about drugs used for congestive heart failure, or I'm talking about drugs what do you call, that are treated for some other maybe coronary artery disease, you will also see antihypertensive drugs as a subclass in that. Even though they themselves are a main class, you will also use those in those drugs in another way. So opioid analgesics are something like that. I hope I'm uh, talking that clearly. Opioid analgesics are a class of their own, but they will come as a subclass in intravenous anesthetics as well, because some similar drugs are used here as well. Right. The main drug will be fentanyl. You also use benzodiazepines. All right. Benzodiazepines will have drugs of their own, diazepam, lorazepam, and all of that. So this is the basic classification of inhalational and intravenous anesthetics. Coming to the first drug, which in your inhalational anesthetics, which is your nitrous oxide. This is basically a slightly sweetish, it has a slightly sweetish odor, and it produces light anesthesia without significant depression of your respiration or vasomotor center. Now, whenever you have or you're trying to perform surgery, or you're trying to induce general anesthesia, you want your respiratory rate and your vasomotor center to be depressed slightly, not completely, but slightly. All right. Mainly, you want analgesia, you want loss of consciousness. Just write goals of analgesia here so that you know what to compare to. Goals of anesthesia. 1 second. So one goal will be loss of consciousness, analgesia, complete analgesia. All right. Uh, so loss of consciousness and loss of sensation as well. All right. So especially pain. So that is how analgesia will tie in. Immobility, so you do not want the patient moving around when you're performing a surgery, obviously. And muscle relaxation, abolition of somatic and autonomic reflexes. You do not want any somatic or autonomic reflexes that to come in between your surgery. So these are the goals of your anesthesia. This is what you will try to do. Now, nitrous oxide, okay, what it will do is it is a very light anesthetic. So generally you will have to add something else along with it. All right. Advantages of nitrous oxide is basically it is a good analgesic, and induction and recovery from anesthesia is rapid and smooth, meaning it will induce very quickly. So you can achieve. So if I draw that graph again, let's suppose I draw this graph. On x-axis I'm taking time, okay, and y-axis I'm taking the depth of anesthesia. Okay, so this is depth. I'll just put it as dp. Okay, the steeper the graph, in the sense that more the graph is like this, basically indicates that it is taking lesser time to achieve this level of uh, what you call depth of anesthesia. If I draw another agent that looks like this, okay, basically indicates that it is taking more time and giving lesser amount of depth of anesthesia. Or if I keep continuing this graph, let's suppose this is where I'm performing surgery. Okay, 1 second. Let's suppose this is the point where I'm performing surgery. This is the point where I'm performing surgery. SX is the what you call abbreviation for surgery. So if this is the point where I'm performing surgery, you can clearly see from this graph that this is taking more time than agent number 1. So let's suppose the black diagram was for agent number 1, and this orangish diagram is for agent number 2. Different drugs. Okay, so basically this indicates that this fellow is taking more time. All right. Nitrous oxide is something that will induce very quickly. So from here on out, you have maintenance. All right. So the same way here you have, from here you have maintenance. So clearly this is achieving induction quickly. You're getting analgesia, surgical, you're getting to surgical anesthesia, analgesia quickly. Nitrous oxide is one such drug that will achieve induction and recovery very quickly. Okay. So even when we're talking about recovery, sometimes some drugs, it'll take a very long time for the patient to recover from the drug. They might become drowsy and they might have nausea, sometimes they will vomit, all of that, and recovery will be long. So it'll take 1 day, 2 days sometimes. uh, Nitrous oxide, that is something that will get, the patient will recover within a few hours. Okay. And recovery is very smooth. You will not see a lot of side effects during recovery. It is non-inflammable and non-irritant. Okay, it will not irritate your uh, mucosa, or it will not irritate your body in any way, and it is non-inflammable. Disadvantages of nitrous oxide, sorry, are specifically it produces a very light analgesia. So disadvantages: it will produce light anesthesia, meaning it will need something else. Okay, it will need a different anesthetic to be added along with it, so that we can, what do you call, get up to surgical analgesia, because surgical anesthesia, because it is a very light anesthetic. It will need, I'll write it this way, therefore needs the addition of another anesthetic. All right, that is one thing. Other than that, nitrous oxide will have a problem, or will cause impairment of DNA synthesis. Okay, impairment of DNA synthesis. Why is this important? Let's suppose there is anyone in the OT staff, operation theater staff, who is pregnant. All right. So in those people, this exposure to nitrous oxide can cause fetal abnormalities. If there is impairment of DNA synthesis, especially in the fetus, if one of the OT staff is pregnant, in that condition, you should not use nitrous oxide, or you should tell that staff member, you should basically replace that staff member, so that they are not, for a non-pregnant staff member. Basically, whenever you have someone who is pregnant, you do not want to use nitrous oxide in their presence. It can cause DNA impairment of DNA synthesis in their baby, their fetus. Obviously, when I'm telling this, it will also go for the patient. If the patient is pregnant and you're trying to induce anesthesia in them, or you're trying to achieve general anesthesia in them, you do not use nitrous oxide in a pregnant patient. Another thing it will do is it will depress bone marrow. Okay, upon repeated use, it will depress bone marrow. So your immune system will take a hit a little bit, right? Now, coming to the next one, generally this fellow nitrous oxide is used with 30% oxygen. Okay? You use 30% oxygen in the gas along with nitrous oxide when giving an anesthesia. Coming to the next type of anesthetic, that is halothane. Okay, halothane is a liquid uh, inhalational anesthetic. This is basically a volatile liquid with sweet odor. All right. Some advantages of halothane are it will induce very smoothly and very rapidly. So induction occurs within 2 to 5 minutes, very quick. Induction within 2 to 5 minutes. Right. So the patient basically will be knocked out within 2 to 5 minutes, and they'll be in surgical anesthesia very quickly. Uh, this is good for emergency situations. Right. Uh, Another thing is it is non-irritant. What do you call, it will not cause any salivary or bronchial secretions to be augmented. It will not cause any salivary or bronchial secretions to occur or to be secreted. Recovery is very rapid, and there is very low chances of post-operative nausea and vomiting. Okay, sometimes I told you recovery can be a little rough, wherein nausea and vomiting might occur in patients when they are recovering. So halothane does not do that. No, post-operative nausea and vomiting does not occur. The disadvantages, though, there are a few disadvantages. This is not a good analgesic, neither it is a good muscle relaxant. So whenever you're giving halothane, you'll need to give another analgesic, basically something to decrease pain, and you'll need to give something to relax muscles as well. So you'll need to give a muscle relaxant and analgesic. Disadvantages, just write as CDV. not a good analgesic or muscle relaxant. Okay. Another thing, this will directly cause myocardial depression. So it is a direct myocardial depressant. Cardiac output will decrease, BP will fall along with heart rate. All of them will fall, and it will sensitize heart to arrhythmogenic function of your adrenaline. Normally, whenever you have a, a reaction in your body where heart rate is going down or BP is going down, reflexively your body will produce adrenaline. Right? Let's suppose your body is sensing that the body's blood pressure and heart rate both are going down. Reflexively your body will start producing adrenaline. You know, adrenaline is a sympathomimetic agent that will immediately speed up your heart rate and your blood pressure. In this condition, what happens is, if the patient is on halothane and such a reaction occurs, whenever adrenaline is released in your body, instead of increasing heart rate and blood pressure, it will cause arrhythmia. Okay, it will be halothane sensitizes the heart to the arrhythmogenic function of adrenaline. Arrhythmias are basically, think of them as irregular vibrations of your atrium and your ventricles. Okay, basically they your atrium and ventricle will not contract properly and they will have vibrations. Okay, uh, uh, incoordinated contractions rather than vibrations. Okay, will you'll understand what is arrhythmia later on, but basically arrhythmia is, it your heart will go out of rhythm. That is the basic definition of arrhythmia. Arrhythmia, it will go out of rhythm. Okay, lub dub, that is the rhythm of the heart rate. It will go out of the rhythm. Another thing halothane causes is it will cause respiratory depression. So it is a myocardial and respiratory depressant. So it will decrease respiratory rate and it will cause decrease cardiac output. Whenever I'm talking about myocardial depressant, it will decrease cardiac output, it will decrease heart rate, and it will decrease blood pressure. There is another thing, whenever halothane is metabolized, there is one particular metabolite that is, most of halothane will be, see, whenever we are talking about inhalational anesthetics, if we talk about the pharmacology of general anesthetic, inhalational anesthetics, you are taking the anesthetic. Okay, this fellow is coming into your alveoli. So let's suppose I put alveoli is Al. It is coming into your lungs, into your alveoli. From alveoli they are going into your lungs. Okay, sorry, lungs nahi, blood. Alveoli itself is present in your lung. It will go into your blood. From blood it is going into your brain. Okay, that is the chain how your anesthetics or inhalational anesthetics will act. Now whenever your body is trying to excrete the anesthetic as well, from brain the exchange will occur like this, in the opposite direction: brain to blood, blood to alveoli, and alveoli to outside. Okay, you'll breathe it out. That is how drugs are eliminated. Specifically inhalational anesthetics are eliminated while breathing itself. So it is very easy to get rid of the drug. Right? That is why inhalational anesthetics are generally used. If you are inducing the anesthetic using your respiratory system, basically you're giving an inhalational anesthetic, you know that for sure most of the drug will be exhaled out very easy. Halothane has one particular disadvantage. 20% of halothane of whatever I'm giving, let's suppose I'm giving 100% halothane, 20% of halothane of whatever dose I'm giving, that will be metabolized by your liver, and it will form a very particular type of metabolite. Okay. In some patients, almost 1 in 50,000 patients, this metabolite can cause hepatitis. Okay. Especially it will cause fatal severe type of hepatitis. So metabolite of halothane may cause fatal severe hepatitis. Okay. In 1:50K patients. So 1 out of every 50,000 patients is susceptible to, or they will have fatal severe hepatitis. 1 in 50,000 patients who are given halothane. All right. Another important side effect of halothane, kind of very important actually, is hyperthermia. Okay, something called malignant hyperthermia. What happens is, when you're giving halothane, in some patients, their body will have sudden increase in body temperature. Why? There is a compound called succinylcholine that is present in your body. Succinylcholine, in some patients, okay, not all, in some patients, succinylcholine will enhance halothene's effect, okay, which will cause intracellular calcium to be released. Okay, this intracellular calcium will cause muscle contraction. Now, you know, for muscle contraction, you need calcium. So, whenever succinylcholine is present in the presence of halothane, or let's say when halothane is present in the presence of halothane, succinylcholine in some patients will cause excessive amount of intracellular calcium to be released. This will cause a lot of muscle contraction. Whenever there is a lot of muscle contraction, there'll be a lot of heat being generated in your body. Right? That is why whenever someone is about to exercise, you tell them to warm up. Right? Warming up is basically moving around your body in several ways so that you make sure your muscles are nice and relaxed and warmed up. Okay, before you perform any types of exercise. The same principle applies here. Because of continuous muscle contraction, a lot of heat will be produced. Now, in case of halothane, what will happen is a condition called a medical emergency called malignant hypothermia will occur, where the patient will not be able to sweat properly because you are giving a general anesthetic. Your responses will be, your reflexes will be dulled, because of which the patient will not sweat properly. And normally, whenever your body is heating up, the natural response of your body is sweating. That is why someone who has fever, they will sweat a lot. When they sweat, their fever will go down. Right? Here, because of halothane, they'll not be able to sweat. One thing. Second is, because of halothane, there is increased amount of body heat being produced. This will cause a condition called malignant hypothermia, where the patient's body temperature will increase a lot. Malignant hypothermia. Okay, it is called malignant because it will start damaging all of your internal viscera and your organs. That is why it is called malignant. Right? This condition can be fatal. This is a medical emergency. All right, it is a medical, excuse me, emergency. And how you treat is, dantrolene is basically an antidote for halothane poisoning. Okay, in case someone is having a reaction due to halothane, wherein they are having malignant hypothermia, you immediately induce dantrolene, and dantrolene will neutralize whatever halothane is present in the patient's body. Right? I hope you understood that explanation of malignant hypothermia. Another thing your halothane does is it will decrease renal blood flow. If renal blood flow decreases, so it will decrease, oh dear, renal blood flow. You know, if renal blood flow decreases, obviously GFR decreases. Okay? Not to be used in patients who have kidney disorders. Now, analgesics and muscle relaxants should be given along with what you call halothane, because as I told you, it is not a good analgesic and it is not a good muscle relaxant. So you will have to give an external analgesic and an external muscle relaxant, either as pre-anesthetics or along with this anesthetic. Right, so we'll end it here. I hope you understood today's class. Tomorrow we'll continue with intravenous anesthetics. All right, propofol specifically. Okay, if you have no doubts.